Our world is a shared experience, fractured by individual perspectives.
Our world is a shared experience, fractured by individual perspectives.
Our world is a shared experience, fractured by individual perspectives. Imagine if we could all feel understood. Hey!
Why did this video sound so bad? Let's find out. What a cool background we just stopped on. So, hey, Brian Miller here. Thanks for coming back to Audio for Content Creators, where we help you sound better and level up for all your content creation needs. In this video, I want to talk about my most recent upload on this channel, the three-way comparison between lav mics, on-camera shotgun mics, and boom mics. This entire video I am filming using the Panasonic G85 with the Rode VideoMicro, which is simultaneously plugged into both the camera itself and the Tascam DR05 portable audio recorder. At various times, I may switch back and forth between the direct signal into the G85 and the synced audio coming from the DR05. There's no processing whatsoever, and anything that I'm using will be, where is it? Lower left, down here. There are two major issues in this video regarding the audio, and if you noticed that the audio in that video sounded lackluster at best compared to my usual work, you are not imagining things. It was lackluster, bordering on bad. Now, the comparison itself between the three different types of microphones and the three different types of setups, the comparison as a reference point holds, but the actual audio quality is bad. And it took me a while to figure out why that was happening. In fact, there were two primary things going on, and so this video is an audio critique on myself. So there are two different issues that you may have noticed when watching or listening to this video, and the first is just a general lackluster audio quality accompanied by some kind of high-pitched warbliness and what I would describe as a kind of a digital artifacting in the audio, if that makes sense. And then the other was this. What in holy hell is that? Yeah, let me tell you, it took some trial and error and a whole lot of different plugging in stuff and different mics, different cables, different recorders to figure out what was going wrong there. We're coming back to that. We're going to do that one at the end of this video. Don't worry. We're coming back. You can try to figure out in your head what you think the problem was there, and almost guaranteed you're wrong. Because I was wrong over and over and over. But let's first talk about the general lackluster audio quality. Now, I expected that video to have a worse audio quality than I typically use for a couple of reasons. One, because I was not going to be doing any processing. I wanted to make sure that anybody watching that video was able to listen to the different microphones and the different setups without any additional processing for as flat and standard a comparison as possible. So without any processing, it wasn't ever going to sound as polished as my audio usually does. I expected that. No big deal there. I also expected the quality to be slightly worse because I was plugging directly into the camera. Now, I recommend all the time not doing this, and if you're a follower of mine, if you subscribe to this channel, you're a part of this audio community, you have probably listened to me at this point and started to record your audio separately using a dedicated audio recorder, portable audio recorder, an audio interface to your computer, and then syncing your audio in post. But the average user that's looking up a video comparing different types of mic setups is probably looking to plug their mic directly into their camera. So I wanted the video to represent the use case for the average user that would be watching it. So I expected that the audio quality was going to be lesser than, because the preamps built into cameras are bad. Average at best, bad in most cases. And I find that the Panasonic G85, the audio preamps are much worse than the Canons that I used to use for whatever reason. But even the Canons weren't great. The audio preamps built into cameras, they're an afterthought. They're not good. They tend to sound flat. They're not very warm. They're just not ideal. They're noisy. Sometimes they're hissy. So I expected it to sound worse, but I didn't expect it to sound this much worse. That digital artifacting I did not expect to hear. And I had no idea where that was coming from. So I started to look into it. I started to do some research. And what I discovered is something, for whatever reason, I never would have thought of. When you record audio directly into the camera records it baked in as an AAC file, an audio file. Now, there's a lot of different types of audio files. WAV, MP3, AFF, AAC. AAC is probably the most standard you'll find when it comes to final files, compressed files that are ready for upload to the internet. The thing is, when you record with a dedicated audio recorder, you have the ability to record in a lossless format like WAV, which is what I always do. I typically record plugged in directly to a portable audio recorder or right into my computer through an audio interface, right back here. And in that case, I'm recording in high quality WAV. It's lossless, it's WAV, 24-bit, and then I do my processing during the video, during the editing, and then it gets compressed down to the MP4. That's the final video file. So it hits, now when I say compressed here, I mean the file compression, not the audio compression, right? So the WAV that I started with when I edit my videos, then I export from Final Cut, so that compresses it down to AAC to mix in with the MP4, and then uploading to YouTube, it hits the very aggressive YouTube file compression as well. So when I start with WAV, I go through 2 rounds of file compression. When you record directly into the camera, it already compresses the file from the lossless format into a lossy format, in this case AAC, as it bakes it in. So essentially, it's like the difference between working with a RAW photo file and a JPEG. RAW file you can push and pull all the colors, the exposure, saturation, everything around, and it doesn't fall apart. You have to really go nuts to make a RAW file fall apart because there's so much data to start with. But a JPEG, as soon as you start pushing it around a little bit, the whole thing falls apart, right? Well, that's the same thing with an AAC file. If you got an AAC file here, it's going to fall apart the second you start doing anything to it. On top of that, it starts off as a compressed, lossy AAC, then it hits the Final Cut export compression, and then it hits the YouTube upload compression. So because I was starting baked directly into the camera, which is something I never do, I wasn't used to hearing 3 rounds of file compression as opposed to just 2. And that is why I ended up with that digital artifacting. Now you'll notice if you watch YouTubers who record, like especially vloggers who are always recording directly into their camera, put on some good headphones, turn up the volume and listen. You're going to hear that digital artifacting in basically everybody's. And I had never really noticed it before. I only noticed it here because I was comparing it to my own videos and listening so critically. So there's one more vote for not recording directly into your camera if you can avoid it. The reason that it sounded like it was a bigger problem with, say, the VideoMicro than when I was using the Rode VideoMic NTG boomed directly overhead is twofold. The problem was still there with the VideoMic NTG, but it's such a higher quality microphone, and it was so much closer to me that the digital artifacting due to the file compression was not nearly as noticeable or as impactful. But it was still there. If you listen closely to the NTG, you hear that same artifacting, which is especially, if you're listening for it, it's especially true, especially noticeable in the high frequencies. That was the first major problem with the video. The second problem, seriously, you cannot believe what I went through to figure out what that was. One commenter, I think, accurately described it as the sound of like a mouse running around. A mice running around? A mouse running around. It was this horrible sound. Now, your first thought might be, oh, it was probably the autofocus. Except I wasn't in autofocus. I was in manual focus. So you think, well, what in the world could that be? And how come it's happening on the VideoMicro and not on the other 2 mics, not on the Rode Wireless Go and not on the VideoMic NTG? Except it was happening on both of those. You just couldn't hear it as much. And what I eventually realized was the problem is this. With the Panasonic G85, I use manual focus. Now that doesn't sound like a problem. It sounds like it would solve the problem. But here is the real problem. When I film studio videos, I can't reach the camera. So I cannot reach the screen from here to manual focus. Luckily, Panasonic cameras come with the world's most amazing remote control app. So I usually have my tablet sitting off screen in front of me with the app that controls the camera. And the app has a manual touch to autofocus. So you can autofocus manual mode. In other words, wherever you touch, it will manually focus to that point and then just stay there. It's an incredible feature, and I've never had an issue with it. So some of you are starting to figure out what the problem was as I'm saying it. The app requires that the camera has its Wi-Fi on, and the Wi-Fi had to be on the entire time while I'm using my tablet with the app so that I can control the camera. I was doing this deep dive Google searching, trying to figure out what in the world this clicking noise could be, and I found Rode addressing this problem with, I think, the VideoMicro regarding GoPro cameras. This was a quick little FAQ from Rode from a couple of years ago that I'll put it on the screen if I can find it again. And they basically said that you have to turn the Wi-Fi off inside your GoPro when you use an external mic with it, because the Wi-Fi signal inside the GoPro, the cable that you use to connect the microphone, acts as basically an antenna and just brings that Wi-Fi signal, all that interference, directly into the microphone. In other words, these mics are not well shielded, the cables are not well shielded, and if you've got a Wi-Fi signal and a microphone sitting right on top of a Wi-Fi signal, it just picks it up right away. Obviously, that made me realize this is exactly what was happening here, is that I had the Wi-Fi on in the camera so that I could use the remote control with the tablet. The mic is sitting right on top of the camera. So a whole bunch of things that I never do. I never use a mic on top of the camera. I almost always have a mic boomed over my own head. I never have a mic plugged directly into the camera. It's always plugged into a portable audio recorder, or into the computer. So normally the camera's 4 feet away from me or more, which is where the Wi-Fi signal's coming from, but then the mic is over here, plugged into an audio recorder that's over here, and nowhere near that, and so I never get that interference issue when I make my normal videos, because I would never be doing any of the things I was doing in that video, which I was making just to help newcomers to content creation figure out which microphone and what type of setup to use. So essentially, that is where the problem came from. Now, again, that clicky sound was also coming through the Wireless Go, and it was also coming through the VideoMic NTG. But it was less noticeable because, one, both of those mics were much closer to me, so the signal to noise ratio was a lot more, so any crappy noise at the bottom of the signal would be a lot less noticeable since the primary source, me, my voice, was so close to those mics, right? One was here and one was clipped to me. And they're much higher quality mics. They provide their own power as opposed to the VideoMicro. And they were physically further away from the Wi-Fi signal itself. They were 4 feet away from it. So for all of those reasons, that is essentially what the problem was. What have we learned from this? We've learned that even when you know what you're doing, you can make mistakes with audio, as I did. Although basically the only thing I could have done differently is decided not to use the Wi-Fi, not to use the remote control, which means I would have had to rely on the autofocus, which I'm doing in this video because I'm using the VideoMicro sat on top of the camera to capture this audio as another demonstration to show you how much cleaner the audio sounds with the VideoMicro on the camera when there isn't a Wi-Fi signal, and also, of course, to show you the difference between the VideoMicro plugged directly into the camera and the VideoMicro plugged into the Tascam DRO5. You should be noticing as I've gone back and forth that it is significantly cleaner when I'm using the DRO5 than the camera. It's warmer, it's more full, but it's still 3 feet away from me, which means it's never going to be that clean or that full. Anyway, this was kind of a rambly video, but I just wanted to talk you through the various different steps that I took. You cannot believe the amount of A/B testing. I tried the VideoMicro, then I tried the Movo VXR10. The VXR10 had the same clicky problem. I kept hearing it, so I tried different cables. I went through every different step until I finally discovered that it was the Wi-Fi on in the camera. So what I'm saying is, all of this is Panasonic's fault for having crappy autofocus. I hope the autofocus has mostly kept me in focus during this video, although I would imagine that it did float in and out a little bit of drifting. Anyway, having said all that, I hope that this was helpful. A little audio critique on myself. Brian Miller here. Thanks so much for sticking with me. Come back anytime to sound better and level up. If you liked this video, hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and we'll see you next time.